So as we get ready, what should we do first? Which colors should go in there first? And the answer I think that works very best is to find the lightest light and the darkest dark, right? And so if you painted with me before, you've heard me say this probably 10,000 times, right? I feel like I say it so much, but I can't stop repeating it because it is the essential next step to find the lightest light and the darkest dark. Now, why start with the lightest light and the darkest dark? My reason is that if you start with the lightest light and the darkest dark, first of all, they're easy to find because they're extremes, right? If you're looking at a room full of people, finding the tallest person and the shortest person is easier than finding the person who's exactly in the middle, right? It's just easier to find the extremes. So that's one reason. But more importantly, when you have your lightest light, that in a sense sets the ceiling for your values. Nothing's going to be lighter than the lightest light, and nothing's going to be darker than the darkest dark. And once you have those two, it's easier to find everything in between. Again, to use another analogy, it's kind of like when you're putting together a big complex puzzle and you put the border together first. At least I've never done this. I've just seen it done. The puzzle assembly pros do that. They go for the sides and the corners, and then they fill in everything in the middle. That's kind of what we're doing when we start with the lightest light and the darkest dark. Now, with this value scale, we have the lightest light and the darkest darks. I'm going to say that the tree, the closest, biggest tree that has a number one on it, that's going to be our darkest dark. And then the sky, not surprisingly, towards the sun, number 9 value there, that's going to be our lightest light. Notice neither one of them, uh, the one is not black, right? It's not a pure jet black in this case. It could be. You might have a darkest dark that is dark as dark can be, like a barn door or underneath a rock or something like that. But in this case, it's not quite that, just pure black. And certainly that number 9 value is a step down from white. So both of them are not quite as dark or as light as they could be. So don't hear when I say the darkest dark and the lightest light that we should make the dark as it can possibly be and the light as it can possibly be. We just want to get that value range or tonal range. So those are the terms there. And as we start this painting, I'm also going to be using, for the most part, average colors. And it'll be a little bit different in the sky, and I'll show you that. But I'm not wanting to, especially on the land and in any place where we can keep the colors simple, I will. I'm not going to go into too much color nuance here at the very beginning. Okay, so that means that this is going to be somewhere in here. We're going to put our lightest light, and then we'll have that tree right there, our darkest dark. So let's start with our darkest dark. Before I do, I'm gonna put out some paint. And take some transparent red oxide. Now, one other thing to note is that in this stage, I am definitely using tube consistency paint. So the consistency of the paint right out of the tube. And that tube consistency paint is just easiest to control. So tube consistency, you can put a little bit of mineral spirits in it at this stage, but easier not to if at all possible. And of course, there's mineral spirits still on the panel. So I've just mixed Viridian and transparent red oxide together. There we go. See, just check it on that value scale. It's down here on a number 1. trying to get that shape right as I put this in. There we go. Okay, go back and look at this. Now, what color is the lightest light? And this is where I'm going to do something a little bit differently. I'm going to start introducing some broken color right away in the sky. So I'm going to keep my number 6, but that color all the way to the right. Let's get some Viridian. And I'm just going to take the Viridian and I'm going to make it a number 1 value, or number 9 value. Number 9 value. Let's see. This is 9. There we go. So there's a number 9 value. And instead of just massing in a big chunk of that sky, I'm going to put in a few vertical swatches just like this. And this is because this is a really good way to begin to establish that energy of the sky and the light in the sky right away. So instead of doing this big opaque shape in the sky, I'm starting with some broken color. And that's going to give me a lot more energy and the feeling of light. And I keep coming back to that. This is not the only way to paint the sky, but I have found in my own paintings and in the paintings that I admire, it's the best way I've seen to capture that vibration of light in the sky. Unlike looking at these concrete, if you will, objects on the landscape, where the light is just reflecting off of them, we're looking through just miles and miles of light as we look up into the sky. And yeah, it doesn't work as well if it's all just one opaque, consistent color. So we can smooth this out a lot, but that's where I'm going to start. So here we have our lightest light and our darkest dark. Now, I think that the best thing that we can do is just keep going with the sky, because we have this value basically established next, but that's not really the right approach. What I need to do is ask a question. So the first question that I asked after I established the underpainting was, where's the lightest light and where's the darkest dark? Found those. There's another question that we can start asking now. And I've just found this to be the question that is sort of like following a lamp through the dark. It's just the easiest way to do this that I have found. Ask the question, what's the easiest thing to see next? What's the easiest thing to see next? A little bit hard when you just have two shapes, but I think the easiest thing for me to see next is I want to see this band go all the way across and start looking at the different bands of the sky. I think those are going to be the easiest things for me to see next as I get this relationship built. So let's start there. I'm going to go back to the palette, and here I am picking up some more of that Viridian in white number 9 value. And I'm gonna walk it out and back like that. I'm just leaving, you can see the undertone showing right now, and I'll explain why that's working in just a second, but let me just keep going for a little bit more.
Are we putting any terp with that or any medium or anything?
I would recommend not, because it'll be runny and it'll be more likely to just sort of mix in with the tone underneath. You'll do better just with tube consistency paint. There we go. You can see these choppy little strokes all the way across. And this is where, now that I have that established, I think it's time to see something different. It's going to get a little bit darker as it goes up, and it's going to get a little bit darker as it goes to the left. And looking at the source, can you see in that middle, there's sort of a green quality to that blue, just ever so green. As you go up, it's ever so slightly getting more into a gray violet. And so I'm going to go back to the palette. And just to keep everything analogous, I'm going to keep the Viridian, but I'm going to take some alizarin. That was a little too much alizarin. There we go. That's better. Taking some alizarin. And by adding the alizarin to the Viridian, I've created a nice, as you can see, ever so slight, not a huge leap, but we have a gray violet color there now. And let's see how that looks. Just putting some swatches across. Looks like it's a little bit dark. I'm going to go one little bit lighter. And this is the only sort of thing that I block in this way routinely, but leave as much space between those strokes as you can manage. And then I'm working them together by just sort of blending into the wet paint that's already there. And it's tube consistency, right? There's no mineral spirits or thinner in it. And so that just means it's easy to work it together. So you see that nice gradient that happened there? This is the darkest corner of that sky. You get a little bit more Viridian and alizarin in there. There we go. Okay. This is just a great way to block in the sky. Okay, so you can see we're getting a sense of that gradient. And I think the thing to do next, if you look back at the bands of the sky, um, it starts to turn sort of yellow underneath that green. So it gets yellow as it goes down. And I think that the best to do that with, I'm going to take some gold ochre and just mix it with white.
Do you use that broken color when you're plein air painting?
If I can, when I'm plein air painting, it's a lot more like trying to get a bunch of children across a crosswalk, across an intersection, right? There just are a lot, there's a lot more of a sense of emergency to what I'm doing. In the studio, I have a lot more time to really work out how these layers appear. So sometimes I do this with plein air painting. Most of the time with plein air painting, I'm just trying to get the color as quickly as I can. I am actually going to change, it just isn't yellow enough, yellow green enough. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the Viridian and I'm going to put Viridian and bismuth together and white. That might be too green, but I want to see. right on the bottom edge of that greener section here.
I'm sorry, Tim, I just wanted to ask you, what's the color of the sky in the left-hand corner?
One more time.
The color of the sky in the left-hand corner, is that still
Viridian and
a
alizarin.
carryover from the,
Yep, this top band, but with just a little bit more viridian and a little bit more alizarin, so it gets a little bit darker.
okay, thank you.
Tim, when you're blocking in the sky, would you say that your colors are darker and warmer compared to your final layer? How do you, or what is the first layer you're putting down compared to what will be at the end that
So
when you say broken color, are you, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, broken color really has more to do with the application. So I'm breaking the color up into these little packets rather than these big broad passages like I would on the landscape.
Mm.
So having more to do with the application being broken. I'm not intentionally making it darker. I want to try to keep the values as close as possible. And you know, average, it's still an average color, meaning it's still going to be, you know, there I can't get all of the nuance all the way through. I have to get some color in and then start varying it from there. So, but I am going for the colors that I think best represent what I'm seeing. And then I'm also going for values as accurate as I can make them.
So it will be in the coming layer that you'll assess what color you'll put on top of it.
That's right.
Because you'll make it a little bit different, or will you try to make it as exact as possible, and just allow just the difference in it being a different paint session, that there'll be a tonal or what do I want to say, a temperature difference in the paint as you apply it in a broken way on top of this broken application?
Right, right. Yes. So it's more like it's almost, I'm trying to think, maybe a good analogy is almost like archery, where you're aiming for the target as close as you can get, and then once you see where your arrow strikes the target, then you adjust from there. So I really am going for as accurate as possible here, but I'm looking at it and I'm seeing, I think there's sort of a grayer pink right through here that wouldn't be, I could mix with a different color and I'll put that in, and so on. But if you're looking for the mindset, it's just the value as close as possible, and then also as good a representation of the color as I can get to from the beginning.
Thank you.
For sure. And I've just been mixing bismuth and pyrrole with each other to get these oranges as I come down the sky here. And we're into the last band that's just come down to touch the top of the mountains. And there we go.
Sorry to bug you, I'm definitely a step behind. That tone of color that you just put the bismuth and pyrrole on, what is that? That looks
This right
sort
here?
of, Right underneath that layer, what was that color that you mixed?
This is pyrrole and
The
pyrrole
sort of
and bismuth
yellowishy green? Yeah, the layer
right above
underneath.
here.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
above. Okay, yeah, that was the same. Pyrrole and bismuth, but leaning more towards that bismuth.
Okay, thank you.
And there's also the undertone through here, which looks very much like that last layer too. Okay, and as we come away from the sun, this fades as well. Notice that this pink is pinker as it's towards the sun. It's just the way the sun is illuminating the, there was smoke too out west. So it's just the way the sun is illuminating all of that. So
The
it's a little
value,
bit
Tim?
more colorful. Yeah, the value is still going to be in that number 8.
Okay, thank you.
There we go. And I'm just softening some of that together a little bit more. Okay, and then I'm just gonna take a breath and evaluate. But you'd see how that starts to read as really that classic, bands of the sky, and that vibrating quality is coming from the broken color application.
So you're trying to get it more red than it is orange, right? The colors don't show exactly the same.
So there's orange here, and it's
Mhm.
getting a little bit redder right as it comes down to touch the top of the mountains. It's more like a salmon kind of color.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, I'm just going to take a soft, this is my number 12 flat Master's Choice brush, and I'm just smoothing out. And really the main reason for doing this, make sure that none of the strokes have glinting horizontal glare, but also draws things together a little bit in a nice way. This right here looks almost done. I really like that. On top, some of these spaces are a little bit big, and we could vary the color a little bit up there. And then certainly we need some, more over here for the clouds. So as I continue to fill in these shapes, I'm going to keep going. So I'm going to go, this is a difficult color for me to mix. There's a green in here. Let's do gold ochre, viridian, and a lot of white. And we're looking for that really unique color that happens at the end of the day, where it's just, there's a funny green that the sky makes. So it's very gray, but it still has a warmth to it. So that's why I'm mixing just gold ochre and viridian with each other. And the goal is to make the value a number 8 value. So it's not quite as light as it was on the other side, but I think this looks perfect, but let's see. All right, I'm going to put the source up in the corner so you can still see it. And this is just for all those negative spaces between these clouds here. Now, why isn't the sky exactly the same color over here as it is over there? Right? And this is a little bit of a preview of the obsession in next session, which is the sun. The sun changes the color of the sky, right? And learning that, I painted the landscape for a while. And I actually heard it on a podcast of all things, right? That there's a gradient of color and value away from the sun. It's not enough just to put a gradient of colors from the zenith to the horizon. You need to account for the sun. And, of course, it's one of those things you go out and look. It's like, wow, you're right. There it is. And it just makes the lights come on in your painting when you do this. So as we get to this side, I'm just using some of the leftover bismuth and pyrrole come out into the sky in this direction. A little bit darker over here. And I'm going to go back like that too. There we go. Okay, so it's, yeah, go ahead.
You
Yeah.
just said bismuth and pyrrole, but I thought it was gold ochre and viridian.
Yeah, so this is gold ochre and viridian. Over here it was bismuth and pyrrole. So just grab some of that leftover bismuth pyrrole mixture and gave us that gradient right there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying there.
So
Okay,
Tim, can I ask a question? So
Please do.
so you have two gradients. So the first one, which is going from the horizon to the very tops, obviously that's a vertical gradient. So would you say that the second gradient moving away from the sun is a horizontal one?
Yes, for the
Okay.
most part, it's not, and you can kind of see it in our value study. It's not even, meaning that it curves around the sun.
Oh. Okay.
So it's not like straight up and down lines, if you will. And you can see
Okay.
you see those curving lines, those sort of C shapes. You think of the sun sort of radiating out in a circular fashion.
All right, thanks.
Okay. So there's our sky. And you will have, and I do, little sections like this one. Can you see how that got a little bit muddy, got a little bit gray? Because we're using complementary colors. We're using warms and cools to make each other shimmer. And so what happens when you get a little bit of that? Well, I'm going to show you. This is just an easy thing to fix. I'm going to take a paper towel, and you can use your fingers or a brush, but I use a brush. I'm just going to push it into that section that I saw that got a little bit gray. A little repair work here. And then that's just going to pull off a little paint. See that? Not a lot, but a little. And that's going to make it easier for me to do the next thing, which is just add a little bit more color. Although that almost just completely solves the problem right there. But let me go back, look at the color, and I'm going to take this same number 6 brush, and I'm going to take my bismuth pyrrole mixture with a very gentle hand. There's a lot of white in here too, by the way. This is the part, it's not, I'm not meaning this to be complex at all. Just putting these little dabs of color on rather than big massed in, blocked in sections. And it's something very unique about painting the sky. And it is really effective. And I hope that that's starting to be clear. Let me do a little demonstration. So when you need to fix part of the sky, just remixing the color here. Of course, the first thing that'd be prudent to do is just test it, see how close it is to everything else. Looking pretty good. And I'm just going to bring it in all the way across. So that's one thing about painting the sky. I'm going to go all the way across the band with this new color in the same broken color way. Going to add a little bit more interest, and it's going to allow me to patch that one section that I felt had gotten a little bit kind of brown right in there because the complements blended together. I am almost tickling on the paint. I can't think of a better way to say it. It's just barely touching. I'm just dabbing it on. So there has to be a lot of paint on my brush. There we go.
Tim, when you were just
And-
talking about the color complements mixing together, is that a way that your colors can become muddy? I always hear that term.
Well, gray. Yeah.
Oh,
Muddy
okay.
muddy is a super unhelpful word, I think. And I never really
It's
use
so
it
true.
because
Okay.
Yeah, muddy, what does that even mean? Gray is the right way to think of it because sometimes you want your colors to be gray. In that case, it's good to have muddy color, right? And sometimes you don't. In that case, it's bad. So yes, if you take, I'll just do a demonstration here on the palette. So if you take this orange and you mix it with, well, let's see, this green, you're going to end up getting something a lot grayer. You can see that gray happening right there. And if you take that gray and you paint it into the sky, or it happens as the colors blend with each other, you're going to have that fresh, vibrant color that you want in the sky. And that's because if you think of the color wheel, the way that we're getting that shimmer is by putting warm colors and cool colors next to each other. But if you mix warm colors and cool colors with each other, you get gray. So you put orange next to blue, blue makes orange look more orange, orange makes blue look more blue, and that works so well in the sky because it makes it look like it's shining with that color. But you blend blue and orange together and you get gray, right? And so you just have to be careful when you're putting these little swatches into the sky that you're not blending.